Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and we are continuing the series of What Have We Been Watching. As always, drop a like down below if you like what you see. Subscribe because we have new content out almost every day. But this last week, at least for me, was pretty slow. Movies I've been watching. What about you, Matt?
It's been slow for me too. I don't know why. I've been so tired. I can normally stay up late, get my work done, and then watch something. But this week, I've just been so blasted. So I've watched a few, and that's going to sound funny judging by the fact that I've still seen like 5 movies this week. Normally, my numbers are up. They're way higher than that normally, but yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my energy back and being able to watch a little bit more and dive into some more recent films. I think a trend people are going to notice here is that the movies that you talk about, Dylan, are going to be very recent and mine are going to be old as hell.
I think that makes for a good mix of movies because while we hit these big movies that come out, we also get some little blasts from the past. But let's kick off with a recent movie, not the newest one, but one that came on the last few weeks, and that is the creator, Matt. I know you saw this a week ago. I saw it about 4 or 5 days ago at the time of recording, and I think I'm a little bit higher than you, but you saw it first. Let's hear your initial thoughts.
It's a very generic, very basic sci-fi movie, but that doesn't really stop it from being a lot of fun and very, very well made. I think we can both agree this is incredibly done in terms of the visual effects and the visuals in general. The visual effects are so impressive, especially on the budget that this movie was made on. Movies that cost 5 times as much as this do not look this good. It's a testament to the director and the creativity and ingenuity in how he shoots stuff for visual effects. You see that in his films, from Monsters to Godzilla to Rogue One. I would say for me, what's holding me back from really loving this movie, I would give it a 7 out of 10. I'd say it's good, but it's not great. It's the script. I think that in terms of the plot, it gets really repetitive at times. It constantly felt like a chase sequence that was like coming and going, and like, oh, we get to this one place and oh, they caught us again and we have to run because they're on our tail and we just escaped them and we're in a new place and oh, they're here and we gotta run because they're on our tail. I got tired of that repeating in every single scene. But on the other hand, thematically, I did find this movie to be pretty interesting. The topic of United States imperialism, the way that the US views their freedom is more important than the freedom of the rest of the world. They will try and impose their freedom on other cultures. It made me think of all of those imperialist wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam.
I would have to agree with your statements about how the movie talks about American imperialism, but also my biggest fault with the movie comes to how the U.S. Army characters are written. They're essentially just like, let's kill, let's commit genocide, that's all we care about. And they try to give like Allison and Janney's character like a little like redeeming quality, but they never revisit it. Outside of that, I did like the script for this movie. I just really like the pacing of this movie. I was very invested at the beginning of the movie, and then once we meet some more characters, including Alfie, I think the connection between her and John David Washington's Joshua is very emotional. You feel their connection, you feel their vibe. I think another weak point for this movie comes with Gemma Chan's character. Just another list of movies where she's a great actress, just her characters are always giving nothing to really do. And I understand the point for that here, but also I feel the payoff was very much underwhelming. But I thought the action very much delivered on what I was hoping for. The characters were very engaging, and just like you said, the visuals of this movie are on point. The production design, cinematography, the visual effects, everything is on point, and I very much was engrossed into this movie from the first frame all the way into the last. And I am happy that this is just going to be a one-off, but I wouldn't be upset if there were more. Like, I could do a director's cut this movie and still have a great time.
I will say I wish that it went a little bit deeper into some of the philosophical angles of what artificial intelligence means to humans. You know, is artificial intelligence technically like a form of evolution, or is it basically another species? Since we're putting ourselves into this artificial intelligence, is that truly the next step in human evolution? I would have loved to see this go more into that sort of transhumanist route, and it didn't. But it's still a very good action movie. It's not one that I'm going to remember forever, but it's a great time at the movies.
I mean, this is probably a hot take, and if anyone here who's a massive Star Wars fan doesn't know, Matt and I aren't the highest on the Star Wars franchise, but I think Rogue One is the best one of those movies by far, and I think that kind of extends here to the creator. I feel like you could kind of change some scenes into both of these, and they kind of work like perfectly, and I just feel like this was an elevation of Rogue One, taking some of the visual aesthetics of that movie and improving upon them. But I do agree that some plot points could be improved upon, but this really just scratched my itch for something new, something original. Yeah, it derives from a lot of other stuff. That's been what most of the criticism online I've seen is, it's just this movie, but done this way. I'm like, you don't really think about that while watching. At least I didn't, and the people I saw it with weren't. But like afterwards, when you hear people say like, yeah, I can see the connection, but that wasn't on my mind while watching. I really liked our two leads here. John David Washington has a soft spot for me. I haven't seen a bad performance from David Washington. I know he's not the most charismatic. He's not his dad. I think he's really made a trend for himself to at least be recognizable in his roles. Like, yeah, Amsterdam's not the greatest movie, but I feel like he adds energy to his role. He gets another protagonist level character here in the creator like he had in Tenet. I hope I don't butcher the name, but Madeline Univoles, who plays Alfie, I think is one of the best child performances we have seen in the last few years.
Just to go back to your point about whether you noticed that it was derivative during the film, I wouldn't say I was really thinking of too many other movies while watching it, but it's such an amalgamation of so many films. It wasn't like one particular thing. I wasn't going, oh, this is just Blade Runner, but it was more that I constantly knew exactly where it was going before it went there. Like, oh, they're gonna go over here, they're gonna find the kid. I'm not gonna spoil this because like this is clearly not a spoiler discussion, but there were certain things involving certain characters that I saw coming from a mile away. Literally, the second that those characters were introduced in the story, I was like, okay, well, that's gonna happen with that, and this person is the creator, and Alfie is a replicant of this person. But the fact of the matter is, that didn't matter to me during it. I wasn't sitting there the whole time thinking, oh, I'm so upset, I know where this is going. I don't care that it didn't surprise me. It's not about whether the destination surprises you. It's about whether you have a good time on the way to that destination. And I did. Anyways, this week I also did a bit of a rewatch of Tangled. Was not something I was expecting to do or intending to do, but I was sitting on the couch, I was doing some editing, and my partner put on Tangled, and so I watched it in the background. Here's my hot take. I like the Disney movies, like the modern Disney movies for the most part. I love Zootopia, and I think Moana and Frozen are both really, really good. Tangled I haven't seen since it first came out. I thought it was fine when it came out. And rewatching it now all these years later, I don't think it's good. That's my hot take on Tangled.
No.
So let me explain myself here. The music is good.
Okay.
When Will My Life Begin? Great track. I See the Light, fantastic song. What I feel about Tangled, it's a transitionary movie between old Disney and new Disney, because what Tangled does is it's taking the aesthetics, the setting, the storyline of a classic Disney princess movie. Like, this feels like it could have been made in the 80s at the same time as The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. It's taking that and then it's transporting it into this new 3D CGI animation, which we've come to expect. While Frozen is trying to kind of reinvent the genre, doing something new with it, flipping the conceptions of what we expect from that princess story on its head. Same with Moana. Moana's very much doing the same. Tangled is just more of the same. It's really basic.
Damn. I don't know. What I like most about Tangled, as you mentioned, was the music as well as the visual style of it. But I also like how it reinvents the Rapunzel story that we know. It takes away from Rapunzel being a damsel in distress who has no character traits at all to make her a very upbeat, engaging, fun, likable character. And I think that's where some of my positives from Tangled go. And I didn't see Tangled when it first came out. I watched it for the first time during the pandemic and very much liked it, very much connected with it, and it would be on my upper end of Disney animated movies. But I can see what you're talking about, because I do agree, maybe it's not doing anything new or doing anything special, but I feel like it's doing all of the basic Disney stuff just to the best level of where it's been, where maybe Frozen's doing new things, but I think Tangled's doing it all better than what Frozen was doing.
I could see that angle. I don't know. I'd put this on the same tier personally as Mulan, Hercules, Encanto, which are movies that are widely loved by a lot of people that I just personally don't really like that much. The music's good, it just is not doing anything for me outside of that. And maybe if I went back and watched Frozen, I would like it less than I did when I first watched it in 2013. But Moana definitely has held up for me on rewatches.
You know, movies, that's the fun thing about them. One person's trash, another person's treasure. This week, I watched Paw Patrol: The Mighty Movie, the cinematic event of the year. It was fine. It was fun. Obviously, it's a kid's movie. It's not doing anything special, like reinventing the wheel like you're talking about, like Tangled didn't do. But I did not hate myself watching this movie, and I thought it was more enjoyable than some other movies that people would probably get very mad at me for saying that I like this more than. I felt like it had some very interesting and good things to say, especially for younger audiences, about self-acceptance. The cool thing with Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie is they're not just pups saving the day, they become super pups, and they all get a trait and a superpower based off of something about themselves. And it's interesting to see how some pups let it get to their head, while others will do anything to make sure others like them, stuff on that line. Honestly, it's a kids movie, not much to talk about, but for 80 minutes there's a lot more worse things you could watch, and the voice cast here isn't the worst. Very recognizable voices you may hear, like Kim Kardashian's in this movie, and so are 3 of her kids. I think that's pretty interesting. Didn't realize that by watching, but in the credits, like, wow, that's cool. James Marsden's in this, Christian Bell, Ray Howery, Serena Williams, and coolest of all is the internet's favorite young boy, Alan Kim, is in this movie. So that alone, I feel like, gives this movie some extra props.
Before we move on from Paw Patrol, would you say that Paw Patrol is cinema?
In terms of animated movies that come out this year, it's probably my my 4th favorite one. So you have the big 3, and then this one would be after it. Especially if you're watching this with a younger family member, there's a lot worse options you can go for. I think this is at least
Saw
capturing...
X would not be a good option. But if you're watching it with younger viewers, you should probably watch Paw Patrol and not Saw X.
That is true. That is true. This is the more younger side of the Saw Patrol double feature, which I did not sadly partake in. I watched Saw a completely different day. But that was my excuse to go in to buy a ticket by myself, is when he asked, like, oh, are you doing Saw Patrol? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm not just going to see Paw Patrol by myself at noon on a Tuesday afternoon.
Anyways, I watched a classic Best Picture nominee this week. I'm on a quest to, at some point, watch every single Best Picture nominee ever. And so far, I think I'm 410 in out of like 570. So I still have a ways to go, but I'm pretty far in. But this week, I watched the 1991 Barbra Streisand directed movie, The Prince of Tides, starring Nick Nolte and Barbra Streisand herself. Let me tell you, Dylan, this movie was a piece of shit.
I don't know if I've ever actually watched a Barbra Streisand movie. I just know her from the South Park episodes where they make fun of her. So that fits in terms of their outlook of her.
Do you know her from Licorice Pizza? Barbra Streisand? Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand.
Yes, I do know that.
The thing with The Prince of Tides, it's a very classic Oscar bait movie. It's the type of Oscar bait that they truly don't make anymore, and I think we should be glad about that. It is so saccharine, cloying. It's just trying to get at your emotions. It's like an important story about suicide and about trauma and abuse, and it's all wrapped up in a love story, and it's done with like a sweeping score and like beautiful lighting and everything. I really did not like this movie. It left a very sour taste in my mouth. I thought it was pretty gross at times, because you can really feel how they're using these very serious topics to try and get at voters and be like, ooh, I'm going to make you cry, and then you're going to vote for me, and I'm going to get an Oscar. And it got 6 Oscar nominations, so it worked, but I think it's a piece of shit.
Not all movies can be good, so glad the piece of shit movie was from long ago and not anything new that we have coming to the table, because you know what? People have been calling my next movie I'm talking about a piece of shit, and I'm here to tell you that it is not a piece of shit, and that is The Exorcist Believer. The trailer says God played a trick on you, but I would say the critics played a trick on you, because this is so much better than what people are saying. The first act of this movie is so good. I loved everything that they were doing with the Felding family, which from the trailers is the Leslie Odom family of the two. We get some emotional connectivity with all characters involved. Clearly, the movie doesn't really care about the other family, even though the other family is, I would say, more featured heavily in the promotional material. They don't have a last name, so for lack of a last name, I will call them the White family. There's not much that goes into them. They are just Christians who go to church and then their kid gets possessed. Crazy. That's about the extent with them. The big negative for this movie, where I think a lot of the critics are kind of falling into, is what they do with the legacy characters. Everything they do with the legacy characters in this movie is completely out of place. It drags this movie down. It derails it even, and it just adds so many question marks to your head. And honestly, Universal or Blumhouse, whoever was the big one behind this, were like, unless you have these characters here, we cannot make this movie. So they shoehorned them in and immediately disposed exposed how they wanted to with very quickly. Think of the 3 most recent Star Wars movies, how they handled their legacy characters. While I wasn't negative in that instance, here I kind of am. I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I am a big Exorcist fan. But once again, the highlights here are the sound design, the cinematography, Leslie Odom Jr. and Lydia Jewett, who played Victor and Angela. And the jump scares here, I think, really deliver. And the exorcism that takes place in the third act, I think, is very well done and has one of the scariest scenes that you will probably see in a theater this year. This is no Exorcist 1973, but I think it keeps you on the edge of your seat. And that's all that you can really ask for with like a modern horror like remake, because usually these are our worst movies of the year. I just don't feel like this one is, and I feel like part of it is just bad rep going in for David Gordon Green, because I will admit I didn't really like his last 2 Halloween movies, and I kind of feel like critics may kind of have the hit out for him, as well as remaking one of, if not the best horror movie of all time. But this
especially in the year that William Friedkin died.
That too, and like this isn't that bad of a movie. I can see where the complaints come from, but they're not to be like a 1-star movie or a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is at worst like a 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10 type movie. It takes risk, and I'd much rather have a movie that takes risk and fails than a movie that just plays it severely by the book. And that's the one positive I can give for David Gordon Green as a director, since he's made his switch out of comedy into horror. All of his movies, while they're not my favorites, they take risks. They do something that you would never guess they would do. Does it always work? Not really. I was very much not a fan of Halloween Ends. I think Kills is a mixed bag, and the 2018 Halloween takes those risks and they pays off. Here in The Exorcist Believer, I think all the risks besides one pay off, and just the one that doesn't pay off very much just left a sour taste in my mouth.
I'm not going to see this movie, but has nothing to do with the reviews or anything. I'm just not a big horror guy, and unless a horror gets really great reviews, I often don't seek it out. But I will take the critics with a grain of salt on this one, because if you're saying it's enjoyable, I trust that there's something enjoyable about this.
Critics put out the hit. That's all we got to say. It's Gotti Part 2.
Gotti Part 2, The Believer. Anyways, I'll wrap it up with 2 movies that I watched this week. The first one being La Femme Nikita. It's a 1991 assassin movie, maybe the original female assassin movie, which we've had so many of in the past few years, like Atomic Blonde, like Red Sparrow, like Lucy, which is from the same director as this movie, Luc Besson. I do not like Luc Besson as a human being. As a filmmaker, I think that he is wildly overrated. And as a human being, he is a very gross man. It's also why I don't like his movie Leon the Professional. I think that movie's pretty gross. And so I went into La Femme Nikita with very low expectations, but I thought it was really, really well done. It has minimal creepiness from Luc Besson. You don't feel the creepiness the same way that you do in Leon the Professional. And really, the shining part of this movie is the cinematography. You can see how this movie has influenced the action genre. It's not very heavy on the action, but the neon lights, the moody protagonist who's largely silent through a lot of it, feels like it really influenced stuff like John Wick. Those movies, I don't think they would be anything like what they are without La Femme Nikita coming out in the early 90s. I thought this was a great time. I would give it an 8 out of 10. Anyways, I wrapped up the week just before we got on this podcast. I watched No Hard Feelings. After months and months of saying, I'm gonna watch No Hard Feelings, I was like, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today. Let me just throw on a comedy. It's gonna make me feel good. And No Hard Feelings was fine. Everyone else was right. You were right, Dylan. There's really nothing to write home about in this movie. It's a bit of a charmer. It's got some funny bits to it. Ultimately, I don't think it goes as far as it could into any of those bits. It feels like they kind of took a step away from the raunchiness that they could have gone into, and it can't decide whether it wants to be a full-on ridiculous, like Superbad-esque comedy, or if it wants to have a little bit more feeling to it. Because of that indecisiveness, I don't think it really nails it on either side. Jennifer Lawrence was solid in the movie, but to me, I would give it a 5 out of 10, but a strong 5. I just can't justify it being a 6.
Very fair. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I feel like some of the comedy bits really work well, and I did like some of the drama angles. I just feel like the movie is very, very, very poorly paced.
Yeah, I will say, I thought Andrew Barth Feldman was the highlight of this. There's a couple scenes from him in there where I was like, oh wow, he's stealing the show right now. The sequence after he figures out what his parents have been doing, he's spectacular. The confidence that he shows in that moment is really, really strong. Otherwise, I don't know, man. I didn't laugh much in this movie. I think that's very telling. There wasn't many bits in this that made me go, like, actually laugh out loud. There's just a lot of moments where I was like, ha, funny. That was Good one.
Well, with all that being said, I feel like at the end of these episodes, we should give a little tease to next week, so people want to come back. I know personally, I will be seeing the Taylor Swift Eras concert movie, so that should have some fun discussion to have around it. I will also, depending on when we record, possibly see Theater Camp, and we finally saw No Hard Feelings, so it's probably time for me to see Blackberry. So maybe both of those will be in next week's video, or they will be in the week after that. What about you? What do you have coming up next week?
Ooh, well, I am currently the festival programmer for the Forest City Film Festival in Canada. Our festival starts on next Saturday, which means I'm going to be very, very busy. I am not going to really be able to go out to the theater much, but I will be catching some of the films that I programmed at the festival. I'll probably be watching Orlando, My Political Biography again before we meet next. You know what? I'll probably, on my own time, I really want to watch JFK. That's my big one on my list for this week. I might also try to watch La Belle Noiseuse from Jacques Rivette. So we'll see. We'll see what I have time for. That's really what it depends on right now. I'm a busy man doing festival stuff.
Fest season is upon us. But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.